love that we have the opportunity to, or the freedom to choose.
Like what?
We have the freedom to choose whatever it is, whatever our marriage looks
like. Can you have sex with multiple partners?
If that is what those people decide.
That's what they choose.
That's what you.
If that's what they decide. And I love that there's this ideal of religion and what we should and shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. And when people, I have found that people will argue a point or try to convey a point that is strongly based on religion or based on the Bible, and then someone else can come in and say, oh, but in the Old Testament,
right,
or oh, further down in Revelations, because I grew up in church. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My grandmother founded the church I grew up in as a child, and then I had gone through several different churches, and I some of the closest people to me are ordained ministers. Mm-hmm. And so for whatever reason, they put up my heathen self. But
you're not a heathen.
I'm definitely not. But I love this dialogue because I think there's always something that we can stand to learn.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm open on, here on the show, I believe in transparency. I believe in people being open and sharing how they feel without judgment.
Sure.
So if we talk about, and I always play both sides, so never take anything that I say personal, saying that I'm saying, I always play both sides. But we look at it from a biblical standpoint. The Bible did not provide great examples of what a marriage should look like, because back in the day, they have cousins and half sisters and, multiple wives.
I'm sitting here in 1 Corinthians now.
Okay, but when we go back to the Old Testament,
it's right there.
Right, but I'm saying if we look overall.
But the Bible is a book of perspectives and stories written by individuals.
It is, but what I'm saying is, if we go back to the Old Testament of before the New Testament existed, I know.
But the Old Testament was just was symbolic of what's to come in the new.
Let me finish. I'm just saying, for those who live strictly by the Word of God as being the infallible, all end all rule your life. If we go back to the Old Testament again, it was more about keeping family ties because Isaac and Jacob married cousins. Abraham married his half sister, and even in the Middle East, they still marry.
That's not.
They have cousins. That's not religion. I mean, that's business.
Old Testament. You're talking about before Jesus Christ.
At the end of the day, it's all a part of the Bible. You can't just say I'm going to take half and not look at the other. Well, and they still have multiple wives. Solomon had King David had multiple wives.
What is the Bible? Can you articulate what the Bible says after Jesus Christ?
No,
I know, but your stance was, and I'm just having conversation.
What I've learned is let people say what they're going to say. Just listen and accept it. That's where I'm at. I'm not debating politics. I'm not debating Bible. Not going to do it.
We ain't debating.
And I love the idea that you can have conversation and dialogue and learn something. Mm-hmm. I think we all stand to learn something.
Right.
And so from your stance of that was the Old Covenant or the Old Testament, my question, not in debate, is simply, what does the New Testament say about marriage? So if we're using references from the Old Testament, what does the New Testament say about marriage that strengthens your stance, not your argument?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't really want to. I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna listen.
No, we want
you to chime in.
I really want to. I'm gonna listen to what y'all gotta say because this is interesting.
Well, we need your perspective. That's why I asked you on the show.
But I want to hear this.
Okay.
I want to hear.
Okay. Well, we have a Facebook comment. Somebody says, "I'm wondering if two people can be strategic and intentional about allowing and cultivating a marriage that is both." Your thoughts?
Say it again.
She's wondering if two people can be strategic and intentional about allowing and cultivating a marriage that is both, I guess, religious and business.
I think so.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why not? Why not? Why could they not be whatever they decide? If that's what their intentions are. And I think the biggest thing is the two individuals being on the same page. We have an understanding that this is what our marriage is. And if I have an understanding that our marriage is something, and you have an understanding that the marriage is something else, and we're both acting out from our own beliefs, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be confusion. Or if there is not structure, whether it's structured under God or structured under some other belief, if it's structured under the principles of business, if there isn't some structure that we agreed on, I think there will be conflict. And I think that happens beyond marriage, in relationship, in friendship, in business, anywhere. I think there does need to be some parameters of some sort. Not that you have to stick to that because that's what you did at day one, but I think structure is important in anything.
I agree. I think there has to be some structure that you, as two people, come together and decide how you're going to govern your marriage. And so for those that, because the reality of it is not everybody practices Christianity. Correct. So does that mean that a Buddhist couple could not have a thriving marriage because they are governing their marriage based off the principles of Buddhism? Does that mean a Muslim couple could not have a thriving marriage because they, govern their principles off of, what the Quran says? I know for a fact, Nuri Muhammad is one of my biggest supporters, and I look at the example of marriage of him and his wife, and they're doing it well. I can't say that they're wrong because they don't follow, what the biblically, in terms of just a soul off the Bible, they've developed their principles from the Quran, that their marriage is not successful. I personally can't say that because they've been married for over 20 years, and to me, they are a perfect example of Black love in this community and what that looks like. And he's written several books on Before I Say I Do and After I Say I Do. But then you have successful couples who are Christian that have been married. First Lady Ramsey and Pastor Ramsey, they've been married for over 20 years. They're doing it well. So, I think it just depends on what you as an individual, as a couple, decide what's going to govern your marriage. But to say that it can't just be a spiritual covenant between two people, I also see that perspective as well. Yeah. Because like I said, unfortunately, sometimes the church is the biggest example of what marriage should not look like because they're not doing it well. Most divorce rate is very high in the church. So
I think it's also the perspective of, I think we come from a perspective of America. Mm-hmm. And so we see how things are done here in the States. And so be it business, be it relationship and community with one another, family, and marriage. And I think divorce rates, and I don't know the statistics, but I think divorce rates here may be different in other places where different religious beliefs and ideologies exist.
Because, in Africa, they believe in multiple wives. So it's one man to 3-4 women, and collectively they live as a unit. I couldn't do that because I ain't sharing my husband with nobody. But to them, that's what governs the principles that they've chosen to govern their marriage. I'm going on to the next question because,
it leads right into the next one.
If religion did not exist, would marriage be relevant?
Yes.
Yep. Based on everything we've been saying, based on the fact that you'd have two people coming together, making the decisions on how they want things to work in their marriage, absolutely. I feel like it would. Based on all the information we've said and the fact that we have two people that come together and they basically decide on on what they feel like will work for them, as far as what makes their marriage work. If religion didn't exist, why wouldn't it?
Thoughts?
Why wouldn't it be relevant? Does that make sense?
If religion didn't exist, would marriage exist?
No. Would marriage be relevant?
Would it be relevant if religion did not?
Would it be relevant right now,
today?
Would it be relevant to today's society if religion did not exist?
It sounds like it's not relevant anymore anyway.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's the path is leading down. Yeah, because we don't believe anything. We take Facebook as the gospel these days.
That's the truth.
But we don't take the gospel as gospel. We think it's something made up. So I think it's the path we're going down anyway.
Okay.
I think it would be relevant. I think based on the history that you shared at the beginning of the podcast, I think it was relevant before it was tied to religion.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be relevant now, mainly because I think we desire to be connected. Mm-hmm. We desire to be in covenant with another person, whether it's under God or anything else.
Absolutely.
And I think we innately love people and having some structure around like the love that we have for people, that, hey, you are my person. And so you are my person. Don't touch my person. That person's mine kind of deal. Yeah. That ownership piece, I think that's important. And then having rules, whatever the rules look like, having rules set for that, I think is important. And then from the business standpoint, because you leave a legacy when you pass on. And so having someone connected to, one, help build your legacy and family and children, but also to help with the business, with property, with family and things of that nature, I think it would still be relevant.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I go back to love. It was not about love. I mean, when we look historically, marriage was not about love. It was about basically the business aspect of it. And so it's only evolved and transformed into two people getting married because they are so in love with each other. But historically, when we look at history, that's not what it was really about. So to see that transformation is interesting. Once Western, like you said, when you look at Eastern and Western society and the introduction of the Catholic Church and all of that, so that's when it became about love. And that's interesting to me because when we...
And I don't see it as a bad thing.
No, I'm not saying it's bad.
And I don't see that as a bad thing.
Because I don't want to marry nobody just for business.
Right. And to anyone that does, more power to you. But I don't see there being a right or wrong answer in this. I just think there is just space. There's so much space for us to have further understanding so that you can make your own choice from a sound space. Because if I only make decisions based on what I know right now, I'm selling myself short.
Right.
And so if I listen to things that I might not agree with, or I might not have ever thought that I had no idea that it was this way, or I had no idea that people somewhere are doing it this way, I allot myself a little more freedom to do, but also freedom of understanding. And so I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think it's just what's best for you. And if there's open communication and clear understanding in the relationship, whoever the persons are, I think that's what's right. That's the right answer, that you and I decide that in our relationship, friendship, whatever, that we're doing it this way.
Because when you think about, let's talk about prearranged marriages. Back in the day, I mean, even today, in some cultures,
societies, that's what they do.
They do prearranged marriages. Two people who know nothing about each other are prearranged to marry so that the family legacy can continue on whichever side.
Look at Prince Hakeem from Coming to America. He had his wife chosen. Well, the first one. Whatever type of music you like.
Right. So
that's how it should be.
Prearranged?
What? Prearranged?
No. Whatever you like.
Oh. You're talking about the first.
Yeah, see.
You said what now?
Nothing.
You say it should be, the woman should be like, so whatever you like. Is that what you're saying?
Whatever type of music you like.
No, absolutely not.
No.
You tried it.
Absolutely.
You tried it really hard.
Turn his mic off.
You tried it.
Well, I mean, and that sparks off into a whole nother conversation because, you know, Fantasia's taking the internet by storm with her whole recent, and we'll talk about that too. So, okay. So it would still be relevant if religion did not exist. So why do you think this generation does not value marriage in either form?
I think there is obviously we live in the technological society now. And so everybody has an opinion. And kind of to your point that in social media, everybody's watching how other people are doing it. Yeah. And so now I'm supposed to do it that way because such and such is doing it that way. And or such and such said to do it that way, as opposed to deciding, understanding, discovering the way I'm supposed to do it and doing it because this is what I desire, not because you told me to or she did it this way or he said it that way. And I think because of that exposure to people now, I think or the desire to appear like we're following suit to what other people are doing or what society says, I think people engage in relationship and marriage, which don't have to be the same, for the wrong reasons. And when I say wrong, I mean wrong reasons that aren't true to themselves. And so then that changes, and I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't want to be here anyway, and then I jump ship and go this way.
Yep.
And I don't see that being best. It wouldn't be for me.
Okay.
So